I'm just going to introduce the firm first, and then I'll go into introductions about myself. I work with a firm called TASLAF Advocates, and so we are a specialist law firm. We offer both blended services of legal and tax, and we have a pro bono arm that we've expanded, and we've moved away from the traditional offerings of pro bono. Those who know law firms, and usually their pro bono focuses on indigenous people and helping people in that aspect. But for us, our pro bono arm really just focuses on supporting businesses and social enterprises. So our SME practice, we have a dedicated SME practice, and it's dedicated to really enhancing the entrepreneur ecosystem in Uganda. And we just provide quality legal support to the SMEs and startups through really just raising their management standards and their practices. And through this is really through collaborations with different organizations such as Enterprise Uganda Today, and also just raising their management standards and providing legal support. So yeah, that's really it about the firm, but we do provide all services that a typical law firm provides, but our unique offering is that we have a specific SME practice. Then about me, I'm a legal associate at the firm. I'm actually a senior associate, and I am the head of the Legal and Regulatory Compliance Department. The department really just caters to corporate entities and supporting them throughout their compliance, from setup to really just being compliant up to winding down. And these legal entities include non-profits, corporate entities, those are for-profit entities, as well as social enterprises. And I'm also the head of our pro bono practice, the SME pro bono practice. And through that practice, we've really had so many collaborations with partners such as Thomson Reuters, Open Capture Advisors, Ande, Oxfam, GIZ, the Innovation Village, Challenges, to mention but a few. We've really been collaborating with so many different organizations that are supporting social enterprises in Uganda. Please do let me know if I'm going so fast or if there's any issue, but I think we can just proceed.
Everything is just fine. Let's
All
just
right.
go.
Great. So so today what we're really just delving into is the legal considerations and best practices for SMEs seeking funding in Uganda. So most SMEs, most enterprises, when they start up, of course, the goal, I assume, is to have your business and to grow your business. And being in a country like Uganda, there's not so much money that enterprises, when they start up, they're usually small, they're usually family owned. So for you to scale and to grow, there's really financing that is needed. But before you get this financing, you don't have, most people think that, okay, I have a great idea, I have a great product, this is going to create so much impact, and you think it's just plain and simple as that. But no, there's so many legal considerations that come into it for you to be able to receive the funding that you seek. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. So before we go into that, we have to first understand the legal landscape for SMEs in Uganda. Like, what is that like and what does that mean? So first of all, there's no specific law governing social enterprises or startups in Uganda. I mean, there's a law in the pipeline, which is a good thing, but there's no specific startup law. And what is the importance of a startup law? Startup laws usually really provide startups with targeted incentives aimed at addressing and the challenges they face. I think the first startup law was in 2012, and that was in Italy. Yes, Italy had the first startup law in 2012. But then over the years, Africa has also started adopting it. The first two African countries that were able to get a startup law were Tunisia and Senegal. So those are the two African countries that first got a startup law. And when, for example, when Senegal introduced their startup law, they introduced three tax-free operations, three tax-free operational years for the SMEs. So SMEs and the startups that were in the country got 3 tax-free years of operation. So that's the importance of startup laws, because yes, we do have so many laws that regulate companies, that regulate corporations. We're going to get into that. But because social enterprises are sort of unique, they're usually not before they even expand into these big companies and everything, the way they set up their setup and everything, we need incentives. So we need specific laws that are supporting social enterprises. So the good news is that we have a Startup Act Uganda project, which is in the pipeline, and this initiative is really in partnership with the Private Sector Foundation of Uganda, that is PSFU, and Uganda's apex bodies for the private sector, and MasterCard Foundation. So we hope that very soon we'll be able to also have a law that will specifically govern and support startups. Other African countries, maybe just to note that also working on startup laws, there's Kenya, there's South Africa, there's Egypt, Nigeria also recently had one, Rwanda, Ivory Coast, DRC, Ghana. So there's really such a shift and there's a push, and hopefully very soon we'll see that in the continent we'll have very many social enterprises that are growing and scaling, especially due to the incentives that will come with these laws. So, so now we're going to go into the key legal considerations for SMEs. I put this here because when we go into legal, everyone, especially small enterprises, the first thing to do is, I don't need that. I don't think we need legal right now. I'm just a small business. I'm just trying to get my things moving. I don't need to see a lawyer. And there's this quote by William Shakespeare that says that the first thing we do, let's kill all lawyers, because there's this misconception and stereotype that comes with lawyers, that they just want to take your money. They just want to make things more complicated for you, which is not the case. You just have to know that as an enterprise, if you're planning to grow and you're planning to scale, you cannot do away with legal. Like, that's just something you just have to make your peace with. If you have any vendetta towards a lawyer, I suggest that you have that sorted out, because you do need the legal advisory, you do need the legal support if you're actually going to grow and scale into the size that you want as an enterprise or as a business. So yeah, so what are the key legal considerations for SMEs? So the first is really business registration. I think this goes without saying. So the first thing is that you should be registered. So you have to comply with the Uganda Registration Services Bureau, that is URSB, and to establish a legal business entity. So the first thing is really choosing the appropriate business structure that you need. There are very many different business structures that we have in Uganda that our Companies Act provides for, and the other various different laws. So we have sole proprietorships. We're going to go into the details of these. So just highlighting them here, we have sole proprietorships, we have partnerships, we have private limited companies, we have single member companies or companies limited by guarantee. So you need to know from the onset, what is the goal of your business? What are the objectives of your business? And when you know that, then you will know how to proceed and what structure to take. And you also need to know the advantages and disadvantages of all these corporate structures, because some of them you may have a vision, but you may settle as, for example, sole proprietorship, and that won't allow you to scale in the way that you want to. Then the other thing is tax registration. You have to be registered with URA. I know there's so much also misconception regarding the tax registration. There's so much complaints with URA. I understand that, but this is just the law. This is just something you can't get away with. And every country, you just need to be tax registered. So you have to be compliant with URA. You have to know what taxes that you're obligated to. There's income tax, there's value-added tax, there's withholding tax. So all these, the value-added tax, the withholding tax apply in different scenarios. So you have to know when must I be able to pay value-added tax, and when must I be able to sign up for withholding tax, the different thresholds and things like that. Then we also have compliance with different relevant regulatory bodies. So every day there's so many requirements that keep coming up, especially for companies or entities registered with URSB or just operating in Uganda. So there's compliance with the different regulatory bodies. There's the Personal Data Protection Office. This is fairly new. We shall also get into that. There's KCCA, there's FIA, and there are very many other bodies that your business may need to be registered with, depending on the work, depending on the product that you're serving or the service that you're offering or the sector that you're under. Then we have intellectual property protection. And this is also key. This is very key because especially if enterprises, generally, most of the social enterprises are really bringing up innovative ideas or products and services. So if you have your innovative product or service, you need to safeguard that. You need to be able to know, should I register a trademark? Do I need a copyright? Do I need an industry design? Do I need a patent? Patents are very hard to get. So they're rare, on the rare side, because with patents, the invention has to be very novel. Like it has to be the first of its kind. Like it shouldn't be anywhere, like you're discovering something ideally. Then there's corporate governance. This is also very key, especially for the fact that most SMEs are usually either family owned or you set them up with friends. So you need to have a clear distinction between the company and the individuals, that is the shareholders. So putting in place procedures and processes according to which the business is directed and controlled, you have to have that clear distinction. You can't run, because if you want to actually scale, if you want to grow, if you want to receive the funding, there has to be a clear distinction that I'm not just doing this as there's no distinction between the shareholders and the company and everything just gets muddled up. No, you have to have procedures in place that help you direct and control the company or business. So now choosing the right business structure. Moving on, so after knowing that these are the considerations that you know that you have to take note of. Now we're going to go with the business registrations and choosing the right structure for your business. So as I say, the different types of ways to structure your business in Uganda, as we had highlighted before. And so you have to understand which works for you and what are the goals that you want to achieve, what is the objective of your company. So the most common and the one that most people go for, especially the fact that now we do not have a startup law or we do not have a social enterprise law, is usually a private limited company. So a private limited company provides limited liability, separate legal entity, and potential for raising capital through share issuance. So a private limited company is really just most of the companies that you see around, unless they're public, but most of the companies that are registered are usually private limited companies. So and that's really just the basic structure. And when you register a company has its own legal identity. So you're separate from the company. A company can sue and be sued, not just you, the shareholder. So when you have a company, the company has its separate legal entity. In case of anything, everything is done in the company's name. So it's a legal person. It's identified, it's recognized as a legal person. Then we have single member companies. So these are just this is where the number of the members of the company is just limited to one member. It's just you, one person. You decide, I don't want to have any other shareholders, and the shares are wholly owned by you. So this, with this, it's just one person. Of course, you'll have nominee directors and alternate nominee directors. These are put in place in case, for example, you pass on or you're not in position. So these people are able to take on the company and after your demise, really. Then we have a company limited by guarantee. So a company limited by guarantee, this is where there are no shareholders, but it is owned by members called guarantors who agree to pay a nominal amount in the event of the company being wound up. So with company limited by guarantee, if you've heard of non-profits, this is actually essentially a non-profit company. So there are no shareholders. There's not really it's assumed that this company is not really operating for a profit. So it's a non-profit company. So I know there's always confusion between when people say non-profits, people think that's an NGO. No, these are two different things. A non-profit is not an NGO, but they could be both. Like you could be a non-profit and have an NGO, but they're two different bodies that even govern them. NGOs are governed by the NGO Bureau and the NGO Act, and non-profits, which are essentially companies limited by guarantee, are governed by the Companies Act. Then we have partnerships. So I'm sure most of us have heard of these. Partnerships, really, this is where there's shared ownership and management, but partners have unlimited liability. So in Uganda, I know other countries have limited liability partnerships, where a partner will be, his liability will be limited to a certain amount, for example, a certain amount that he probably put into the business or something. But here you shared everything, shared ownership, shared management, and you have unlimited liability, meaning the acts of your partner affect you as a partner. So for example, if you're 3 people in the partnership, every partner, so if one partner A does something, the three of you will have to share in that liability, all of you together. And all of you have the right to own, to run the company together. So it's really just shared ownership and management, but it's not a company, it's a partnership. Then sole proprietorship. Proprietorship, this is really the simplest structure, but offers no liability protection. So sole proprietorships are really, you really just register and it's just you, but there's no, the difference between them and the company and the private limited company is that there's no liability protection. Yeah, like your entity doesn't have its separate legal entity. You're more or less the company. It's one or more the same person. So that's it. Then public limited company, these ones are really rare, especially for enterprises, unless you reach a level where you're scaling and you become so big, you turn the company into a public limited company. So these are suitable for large scale businesses seeking public listings. So this is where you list on the public listings and then you're able to have public shareholders, people from the public having a say in the business as well, because there'll be shareholders as well. Yeah, I hope we're moving on well. I think the questions will come in the end. So yeah. Just keep noting down anything that interests you, just note it down, and then I will be able to have the discussion after. All right, so now, just to go back. So really, again, when you're choosing the structure, so you have to assess what is it. So ideally, we usually advise enterprises to go for a private limited company, because at the end of the day, you need to have, first of all, a separate legal entity from your shareholders. You have to have liability that is separate from yourself. So the liability should go to the company. And second of all, they should be able to raise capital through share issuance, especially now, and the topic is receiving funding. So we are going to go into the different types of ways of receiving funding, the debt or the equity. So if you're going for equity, which is also usually common as well, you're supposed to be able to have shares to issue, shares that the investor is able to take on. So this is the most common and the one that we advise most social enterprises to take, since we do not have specific social enterprise law. So yeah, so that's something you need to think about. And having the separate legal entity is really key. It's really key because it separates the shareholders from the entity, and it's already one step towards the corporate governance. All right. Compliance and regulatory obligations. So now, once you register, for example, your entity, and we're going to assume that you're registering your company limited by your limited liability company. So there are compliance obligations and compliance and regulatory obligations that you must and you should be able to oblige by. So the first is, of course, as we mentioned, registration. So once you've decided that, okay, this is the setup I'm going to take, I'm going to be a limited liability company, a private limited liability company, you have to register with the relevant bodies. So you'll register with URSB, that is the governing body that registers and deals with all company-related issues. So that is the Uganda Registration Services Bureau. So you register with URSB. Once you've registered with URSB, the next step is to register with URA. You have to register with URA. Again, you cannot avoid this. If you're going to receive funding, we're going to talk about it again later on our due diligence checklist. The thing that they'll always ask you for is, are you compliant with your taxes? What have you registered? Have you been filing the relevant filings? Like what steps are you taking? So you can't do away with that. You have to register with URA. You have to be compliant with them. Then you also have to register with the Personal Data Protection Office. This is this is a fairly new requirement. We got a Data Protection and Privacy Act in Uganda in 2019, so it's fairly new. The regulations were 2021, and so it really mandates that all bodies that are receiving data and you're just dealing with company information, you really need to protect this. Personal data protection and privacy is a key issue right now. Most countries, everywhere, it's something that is key. So that's why, as a country, we're also pushing for it. We need to be able to keep up with what's going on everywhere. And data right now is a big issue, if you know, because of we have so much going on with the technology development. So we know now that they're selling people's data, they're taking people's data and they're selling it. And some of these enterprises, for example, those in the tech sector, usually you're taking people's information. So you need to be registered with the Personal Data Protection Office and you have to be compliant with them. They also have various compliance obligations, such as filing compliance reports. We'll go into that as well. And so that's something that is key and something that you have to take note of. And investors right now should be also asking for that. They're really, when they do their due diligence, when they come to us for a due diligence check, it's one of the things that they ask us to also include. Can you confirm that this person is registered with the Personal Data Protection Office? And how are they compliant with them? So it's fairly new, but it's something that is definitely going to keep picking up speed. Then KCCA, of course, this comes with the licensing. You have to definitely be able to get the necessary licenses that you need from KCCA. Then there's the FIA, that is the Financial Intelligence Authority. So enterprises, especially those that deal with especially those money platforms or anything like that, you need to also register with the Financial Intelligence Authority. The Financial Intelligence Authority is really supposed to curb anti-money laundering. So it's also a requirement. They're not so strict, but it's advisable to also be compliant with them. Then filing annual returns or compliance reports with the relevant bodies. I think I've just highlighted a few of these. Most of these bodies, all of them, URSB, URA, PDPO, and the FIA, there are compliance reports that you have to file and annual returns. With URSB, you have to file your annual returns every year. Every year you have to file annual returns. And it's really, really, really simple, especially if you're a local company registered. Most times it's just the requirements for filing annual returns are really simple. It's just the director's IDs. Yeah, so it's just any changes in the company, but it's very, very simple. It's something that, and now that URSB has an online platform, that is the Online Registration Services Portal. So you are able to do all these things online. It's very easy, even if you do not have the means or the funds to get a lawyer, you are able to do these things yourself through the URSB platform. Then URA, we all know the annual returns, income returns that you have to file with URA, and also depending on the different tax heads that you're registered for, you also have to file those with URA as well. Then PDP as well also has a compliance report that is filed every year. And after you register, you have to file a compliance report every year by the 25th of September. So that's also an ongoing compliance obligation that you have to do when you register with the Personal Data Protection Office. The PDP as well this year has also introduced an online platform for filing these reports, which is also very simple. So you can be able to file your compliance report online. KCCA, usually you have to renew, these are usually renewing these licenses. So for example, if you get a license, they usually last you 12 months. You have to renew these licenses every after 12 months. The FIA also has a compliance report that is filed with it every year. Every beginning, you have to file with the FIA by the 31st of January every year, once you register with it. Yeah, so once you register with the FIA, you have to file that report with them by the 31st of January every year. And that's now the only problem with the FIA is now that their report is a bit bigger. It's more bulky than these other ones. It's I won't say complicated. It's just a lot of so many unnecessary things that may not apply to you because the different types of entities that file these reports. So there are so many pages that may not apply to you. So it can be intimidating, but it's also a fairly easy process. And the FIA right now it's one of the easiest bodies to deal with. Then updating company information on the company register. So again, once you've registered, and of course, you get your registration documents, the different registration documents, they are the forms that show the directors and the shareholders. So for example, if you change a director, you have to be able to update this information on yours. We don't just change directors and say that, yeah, I've changed a director. You have to pass resolutions. You have to register these resolutions with URSB, and then you have to amend the forms. So for example, initially if you registered and you had Shadiya as a director, but now you want to move and add Belinda as a director, you would have to amend, not only just passing that resolution and registering it with URSB, you have to amend that form. That would be Form 20, you amend Form 20 and now remove Shadiya and put Belinda Yeah, so all your company information has to be updated on the register, because once they do a search, everything has to correlate. You can't say that right now, these are the shareholders, or this is what is happening, these are the directors. And then once we check the company's registry, it's totally different names, it's different people. And this happens a lot. People, it will come to years later, and then they're like, oh, that person left long time. And to change that information, you will have to look for that person, because that person has to sign those resolutions, and you'll need their IDs. You'll have to look for that person. So always do it at that point when all the changes are being made. Do it and make sure that all your information is updated on the company register. Then obtaining necessary licenses and permits from the relevant authorities. We've talked about this. Then adhering to corporate governance principles, especially for family-owned businesses or companies with multiple shareholders. Again, this is a thing that we see a lot. Most SMEs, most enterprises usually start up as family-owned businesses, or you're starting a venture with your friends, but there's really no distinction. You already get like you're running your household. No, there has to be corporate governance principles in place. You have to have your board, you have to have your board, you have to have your board of directors. So it's advisable to have executive and non-executive directors. The executive directors, of course, are those that will be the ones that are registered, but then you can have non-executive directors that help guide and help guide the business. So usually the non-executive directors, you set up a board, they're usually people that are supposed to influence. They're not really running your company, but supposed to help you. For example, if you're into health, you should get non-executive directors and have, for example, someone on that board should be able to give you advice with regards to the health sector. You should have someone, a financial person on that board. You should have advisable, so a legal person on that board. So, and usually those non-executive boards usually are just to help you run the business. Like when the boards meet, usually you can give them a small token to appreciate them. They're not running your business, but they're just helping you and guiding your business. So that there's that distinction between the shareholders and the directors as well. So it should always be that distinction. Things should not be muddled up. Things should not just be done like as if you're just running a household. So you should be running a company, so you should have proper corporate governance principles that cater for accountability, that cater for fairness and things like that. Then comply with industry-specific regulations. So depending on the industry that you're operating in, there are also additional laws or specific regulations that may apply to you. So you have to comply with those as well. So I didn't really get into that because there are very many different sectors, and I'm guessing most of the enterprises here cover and cut across very many different industries. So there are many different industry regulations. So you have to know that what are the industry regulations that govern me. If I'm in health, are there specific other permits that I need? Are there specific other licenses that I need? What do I need from my industry? So those are things you need to take note of and always look into. And we move on to the essential contracts and agreements. So yeah, so we've looked at the obligations that you have to comply with. So always please take note of these. So all the different regulatory bodies that you have to comply with and the different regulations. Now we're moving on to the essential contracts and agreements. So so some of these are the key essential contracts and agreements as an SME, as a company, as a business that you need to really take note of. So we have the shareholders agreement, and this is really it's a crucial document that really outlines the relationship between the shareholders and the company. So it's not a mandatory agreement. It's not something when you're registering, they won't ask you for a shareholders agreement. The forms when you're registering your company are pretty straightforward. You'll have the form of the directors, you have the form that shows the shareholders, you'll have your MEMAs, that is the Memorandum and Articles of Association, you'll have the form that shows the company address. So the shareholders agreement is not something that is mandatory, but you will need it because even when you are receiving funding, especially if you're going to receive equity funding, you will need a shareholders agreement. So it's really a crucial document that outlines the relationship between the shareholders. So it's, as I said, we highly recommend it, much as it's not mandatory. So it's really just a contract between the shareholders, and and it's separate from the company's constitution, that will be the memorandum and articles of association. Usually the memorandum and articles of association also sort of outline this, but a shareholders agreement is more in-depth and it's more clear. So it provides flexibility and certainty in managing the company. So it will really usually highlight the roles of the different shareholders, for example, their obligations, their rights, their voting rights, things like that, issuance of shares, when do we issue shares, how do we issue shares, things like that. Yeah. Then client and supplier contracts. So this is also another thing. As SMEs, as enterprises, as you're growing, you're going to get into so many contracts with your clients and your customers. But sometimes these contracts that you're getting into will be detrimental to you down the road because you're not paying attention. You're so quick to have clients, you're so quick to get certain suppliers. You're just signing these agreements without really looking at the terms. What do they say? What are the terms of service? What are the payment terms? The dispute resolution clauses? The taxes involved in these contracts, things like that, especially with suppliers, is there withholding that needs to be paid, things like that. So these are also essential contracts, and you have to make sure that your contracts are always airtight. Have a legal person at least review them. I know as enterprises, there's the zeal to do everything on your own. You think that you can do it, but trust me, you cannot know it all. You cannot do it all. You need support, you need help. So it's better to have a legal person at least review these contracts before you get into them, before you tie yourself down to clauses that are going to be detrimental to your business. You will be dealing with suppliers that actually have lawyers, and they're going to hide certain clauses in there that are going to cause downfall to your business. And it's just something simple as a supplier contract. But before you know it, you're in so many disputes, you're in court, and all this is something that is just going to drag your company. And by the time it's time to do your due diligence, you have cases in court, you're already just tainting the company, and it's not a good look. So avoidance is better than cure. So always make sure that your agreements are reviewed. Then we have partnership agreements. So this really just they really outline the terms of the partnership, includes profit and loss sharing, decision making, and dispute resolution. So you could be registered as your limited liability company, but then have, let's say, a partnership with, let's say, another entity, just really supporting the business. So if you're going into any sort of partnership with another entity, make sure that partnership, there's an agreement to that. Make sure that everything is documented and everything is properly outlined. Again, the goal is to avoid any disputes that are going to drag your company down, that are going to cause any more financial drain, and that are going to really just add onto litigation matters on you. So that's the goal. Then employment contract. This is especially when you are growing and expanding. And I know initially most enterprises are not really hiring, but when you do start hiring, actually do take the right procedures and the right routes. Employment law is something that is key. You might look at it and think that, okay, it's not really key. You might hire someone, but let me tell you, these days, people are very, very smart. People have so many advisors in their ears. We've seen this every day. There's so many labor suits. Sorry, excuse me. There's so many labor suits that are happening in the labor office because of employees. You look at someone and think that, okay, they do not have so much knowledge, they may not go sue me, but there's so many labor suits that are happening. So take the right routes. Make sure that you have employment contracts with everyone that you hire. Employment contracts are quite easily simple, but it's a very touchy and technical subject. So you have to make sure that you are obliging by the Employment Act. The Employment Act provides for certain things that you cannot do away with. For example, even when it comes to termination and when it comes to dismissal, how are you terminating? People think that you can wake up and say that you are fired. Are you giving notice? Are you not giving notice? So how are you actually terminating your employee? How are you taking them on? Also, there's the issue between, are you having an employee or are you having a consultant? That will also raise tax issues, because if you're having an employee, you are supposed to pay their payee. That is their pay as you earn as well. Consultants, there's the 15% that you have to remit the withholding for consultants. So, and with the payee, it's the 30%. So you have to be sure who is a consultant, who is an employee. There's a distinction between them. You do not mix them up, because an employee is an employee. A consultant is a consultant. A consultant is there just to offer their services. They're not under your control. They come and they do their work and then they go. They use their own tools. They do not abide by your working hours. They don't abide by your policies. They just come and for a specific service, they offer you that service. Then employees, these are what? These are your employees. They have an employment contract. They have to have an employment contract. These are people that will, for example, get the benefits of the company, have to abide if it's an 8 to 5. You provide the work tools for them to work. They do not come with their own work tools. So there are very many different I want to go into that now, but there are very many different ingredients that we use to identify who is a consultant and who is an employee. That is, what is a contract for services and a contract of services. Then we have non-disclosure agreements as well. These are NDAs, protecting confidential information. So especially if you're dealing with products or for example, services, I know sometimes I think it's really common in the tech spaces or people that are dealing with products that you feel like this is my concoction, I have my special recipes for that. You can also go into an NDAs. So you're trying to protect your company as much as possible. Sign NDAs if it's possible. They can be a 1-page NDA, it could be 2 pages. It doesn't have to be long, but the goal is just to protect your company. You'll just excuse me, I'll just take some water. Just a minute, but yeah, so that's really the essential contracts. There are many other contracts that you'll be dealing with. I know you deal with in the day-to-day, but usually most of them fall under here. If they don't fall under there, then it's still the same principles that apply. You have to ensure that your contracts are actually reviewed and make sure that you're protected in all ways. Don't really just give anything like just on to chance. Yeah, so don't. Sorry, excuse me. Okay, now we're into financing for SMEs, which is really the goal, the end goal and why we're here today. So there's financing for SMEs, and financing for SMEs is usually debt or equity, or they could be mezzanine. Mezzanine is really the hybrid financing where there's both debt and equity involved. But we'll just start with the debt financing. So debt financing, this is really involves the borrowing money that must be repaid with interest. It's as simple as that. You're just taking debt, you're just borrowing money, and you have to be repaid, and it has to be repaid with interest. And common forms include usually bank loans, and then the investment funds, debentures. So of course, the traditional route is really to take out a bank loan. It's really just to go to a bank, ask for a loan and all that. But as a social enterprise, this really is not favorable. We know this, banks are really, their processes are really very hectic. The list of requirements are really high. And as a social enterprise, you don't really sometimes really meet those requirements, maybe if you've grown to a certain level. But if for those that can be able to get them, well and good. But now that's why we have so many investment funds coming into the country to give money to enterprises like you, because it's an easy way out. And for investment funds, most of them are not even registered. They don't have to be registered in the country. Most of the ones that we've dealt with as a firm, because we've dealt with so many of them, because we deal with both sides, both the enterprises and we deal with the funds. So we know what everybody is looking for. We know the balance in this relationship. So the investment funds don't really have to be registered in the country. Of course, that's another issue, another debate for them. But most of them come to give out money. It's as easy as that. They just come look for entities that actually have potential, that they believe are creating impact, and they want to actually invest in these companies and give funding to these companies. So there are quite many, and I believe that you should always be out on the lookout for them, because they are less hectic than banks, but you also have to be careful with who you're dealing with. Of course, there are very many fraudulent companies out there, but you have to also be very keen. So before you opt for debt financing, these are the legal considerations that you will have to consider. So there's loan agreements. That's the first one. Of course, this is just key and basic. So you'll have to enter into a loan agreement, and it's just really a contract that outlines the terms. For example, how much interest will you be paying? What are the repayment schedules? What is the payment timelines? What is the collateral and the default provisions? So in case you default, what happens? Things like that. And then we have security and collateral. That's also a key thing. So with debt, one of the main ingredients is that there has to be security and collateral, because I'm giving you your money. In case I'm giving you my money, in case you default, there has to be something. I can't just lose out like that. So the lenders often require collateral to secure the loan. And this collateral can be immovable assets such as land, equipment, or other assets. So that security and collateral is key. And this is another thing that we will be discussing, is that for the security and the collateral that is involved, especially when it comes to land, you have to ensure that this property, all these assets, they have to be in your name. I know we're going to look at it when we go to the due diligence checklist, but these things, the security that you're putting out either has to be in the company's name or in the shareholder, at least the shareholder's name. Don't just put security that is for someone else, that, oh, I have a car, that my friend's car. I mean, it depends on the relationship with the investor, but most times it's tricky for them. It's a risk for them. So you have to have security and collateral that can be used to secure the debt. Then the interest rates, this is also a key thing. So you have to look at what are the interest rates that this funder or the bank is asking for. And usually they must comply with the usury laws in the country. We have limits, we have laws that state how much the interest rates may not exceed and things like that. Then loan defaults, these are really the consequences of default, should be clearly outlined, including the potential foreclosure or repossession. So in case of default, for example, it should be stated that in case of default, then the lender will be able to repossess whatever collateral you have put, things like that, or the potential for foreclosure. Then tax implications, interest payments are often tax deductible. There's also tax implications involved. So for example, as I mentioned, the many foreign funders funds that are coming in to actually offer funding, but then when they're going back, one of the things that they also usually consider are the taxes that are involved with them offering you their money. So when they set up here, they have more tax obligations, but when they do not set up here, usually when you are, for example, paying them, there's a withholding that the government requires from you. Like you have to withhold a certain amount of 15% before you remit their dividends back to them, their interest payments, back to them. So all these are considerations. You have to be able to know this and plan for them and ensure that all these are taken care of within the agreement and highlighted within that loan agreement. Then regulatory compliance. So you have to adhere to financial regulations, like licensing, and really consumer protection laws when it comes to debt financing. Yeah, so we're moving on to equity financing. So under equity financing, this really involves selling ownership shares in the company in exchange for capital. So this is why we said in the beginning, if you are going to look into receiving funding, you have to consider whether you're going to do debt or whether you're going to do equity. So, I mean, or even a mezzanine. So if you're going to do equity, you need to have a limited liability company, unless your plan is really just to have debt financing, which even is also tricky if you're also not a company, because a company needs to have their separate, as I said, a company has separate legal identity. It's their own person and the law. So the lender needs to be able to know that I can come after the company and instead of the individual. So with equity financing, it involves really just selling your ownership shares in the company in exchange for capital. You're just raising capital for the company, really, and you're selling shares in exchange for that capital. So common forms include venture capital, private equity, and crowdfunding. So I would like to highlight, especially with the venture capital and the private equity, that with the new tax amendment laws, sorry, you excuse me, I have a bit of a cold, so. With the new tax amendment laws that have been, that the parliament actually passed, I think we're just waiting for the president's assent to a couple of them. So they're actually, one of the proposals was giving private equity funds and venture capital funds that are registered with the CMA incentives, like tax-free incentives. So we'll see that if actually this is assented to and this is actually passed into law, we're going to have more funds coming into the country and offering money. So because they're going to have we're going to have more tax incentives for them. So they have an easier way of operating. So they're going to come and register in the country and we'll be able to actually give this money, and there'll be so much more money coming into the ecosystem because they're going to be tax incentives for them. So this is something that you should actually be looking out for. So the legal considerations for really equity financing, the first is the shareholders argument. As I said, it's going to be key. Remember, we said it's not a mandatory when you're registering, but in operations really, and as you are moving forward, you're going to need it, especially if you're planning on receiving financing. You're going to need your shareholders agreement. So especially when you're opting for equity. So if you're having someone buying shares into your company and having equity into your company, you're going to need the shareholders agreement, because this outlines the rights and obligations of the shareholders, because it, as we said, it outlines the rights, it outlines the obligations, it outlines the issuance of shares, how you transferring shares. All these things have to be outlined in the shareholders agreement. So, or whatever you're doing, the financing that you're receiving has to be in line with your agreement. Then company incorporation. Of course, the company must be legally registered. As we said, as a limited liability company, you must have shares that someone can buy. Then share valuation, determining the fair value of shares is crucial for investor relations. So most times what happens is that when you're registering, usually most companies register, if your nominal, if the share capital is not more than 1 million Ugandan shillings, it's usually what people use to register. It's simple as that. You can always increase it, you can always reduce it, but for the sake of the fees involved with registering, most times it's usually 1 million. And usually it would be 1 million, and then it would be, let's say, 100 shares valued at 10,000 shillings each. That's really just that's the value then. But as you expand and as you grow, as money keeps coming in, as your activities keep expanding, you're going to have your share values are going to increase. Like the value of the company increases. On paper, yes, as you registered, you'll say you had the value of each share was 10,000, but that's not the fair value. And also, of course, URA is never going to also go with that, depending on how much capital is being put into in exchange of the shares. So for example, if someone is putting in over 30,000 US dollars for, let's say, a certain amount of shares, you can't still say that the value of those shares is at 10,000 each, because that's not the value of the company. So you're going to always have to do a fair valuation. You get a valuation report, you get a valuer to value the company and give you the actual value of where does your company stand now. So you have to do a share valuation. And that is key, so that the investors know that, okay, this is where the company stands now. This is the value of the company. And I won't go into the specifics of that because that's not really my area when it comes to the share valuation, the people who do that. And so once they crunch the numbers, they'll let you know that this is actually the value of your company. And this is how much a share should be worth or is worth. So that is also very key when determining how much. So it's not just that, okay, I want to receive $30,000 or this, like what are the values? How much is your share worth? So in your company. Then there's share issuance, of course, compliance with securities regulations for issuing shares. The Companies Act is very clear on how shares can be issued, the procedures that you take when you're issuing these shares. So that is also something that is key when it comes to this. So how are you issuing the shares? For example, you could be 2 shareholders or 3 shareholders, and let's say all the shares, you have 100 shares, and all the shares accounted for. Are there unallotted shares? Are there shares that you did not allot? Or are you creating more shares? Are you diluting the company in that you're creating more shares? Because when you create new shares to to be able to cater for the shareholders, remember you're also diluting the company. So these are considerations that you have to take into place. So for example, sometimes people will set up companies like it's okay not to, if you have 100 shares, say the company has 100 shares, it's okay not to allot all of them. You could be 3 shareholders, they could have 30, 30, 30, and 10 shares are unallotted. And that's fine. When you get an investment board, you can give them those 10 shares, or you can even create 10 shares. You can create additional shares if all the shares have been allotted. So it's really not, it's not confined. So yeah. Then also the share issuance thing is also quite wide, but maybe we'll discuss that as well as we are taking in the questions. Then we have also the investor rights, defining what the rights of the investors are as they're coming on as shareholders. Are they coming on as majority shareholders? Are they coming on as minority shareholders? Do they have voting rights? Do they have dividend rights? Do they participate in management decisions? All these are things you should consider before actually taking on equity financing. Remember, you're having someone buying shares into your company, but what are they, what are the rights that they're going to have into this company? Do you want someone to actually come in and take over your company? Or is it just that you want them to have shares? Are they just going to be able to receive dividends and they do not have voting rights, or they do not have management rights? Because all these come with being a shareholder. As a shareholder, the different rights are attached to you. You have voting rights, you have making decisions. So you have to be able to outline clearly, like, what are the investors' rights as a new shareholder? What are the benefits that they're going to be getting out of this? Are they going to be able to make management decisions for the company, or do you still maintain that and they're just really adding capital into the company? So all these are things that you have to consider before you're quick to actually receive this funding. And I mentioned dilution, that is understanding the impact of new share issuance on existing shareholders' ownership, because when you create more shares that were not essentially part of the company, you're diluting the company, the shares. So you're diluting the shares from the existing shareholders. So that is also something that you have to consider once you are taking on this route. And then also the key thing is, another thing is the exit strategy, which most times certain enterprises do not consider. What is your exit strategy? I mean, for the investor, are they going to just stay on and be part of the company? Is it after a certain amount of time? When do they leave? Like, at any point, do they leave? Do they give you back the shares? Do they reassign the shares back into the company? What happens? What is the goal? What is the plan? What do you see? Because sometimes you're just quick to receiving money, but you're not thinking about this. You're receiving the money, but you've not catered for an exit strategy. Is it after 5 years? Is it after how long? What is the agreement between you and the investor? And what do you as the enterprise actually want? All right, now moving on, since we've understood, as I mentioned, I didn't really provide for the mezzanine funding. That is really the hybrid. That is where there's both equity and debt involved. Yes, it can happen. You could have both debt and both equity involved from a single investor. So it's really just a hybrid of both. But all these other considerations that we've discussed will also apply. So now the key question is, what do investors look for during a due diligence? So investors, before they come, they'll get their lawyers and they'll say, okay, I'm planning on investing in this and this company, and I need a due diligence on this company. So what actually are they looking for when they ask for a due diligence, especially a legal due diligence? There are different due diligences involved, but when it comes to a legal due diligence, this is what is really involved in a legal DD. So the first thing is the corporate structure and governance. How is the company registered? Where is it registered? For example, if you're saying that you are a limited liability company, are you registered with URSP? What is the governance in that? Who are the shareholders of this company? Who are the directors of this company? So everything. So when we do the due diligence, we have to be able to see from URSP. So for example, if you've been engaging with this investor and you've said Shadiya and Belinda are the shareholders, but then when the lawyers do their due diligence, they're seeing Belinda and Derek, and Shadiya is nowhere on those documents. And yet Shadiya is the one who has been engaging these investors as a shareholder. So the corporate structure and the governance have to tally. So they're going to do their groundwork. Don't think that it's just you going to tell them this. They're going to do their groundwork, and all this information has to tally. So your corporate structure and your governance, that is your shareholders, your directors, and all that. Yeah. Then the company constitutional documents. What do the MEMAT say? What do the memorandum and articles of association say? Your articles and your memorandum and articles could be saying that you're supposed to be engaging in a different business, but then you are here engaging in a different business and there's no correlation. Or your articles and your MEMATs could actually be prohibiting you from receiving a certain amount of funding without certain approvals, things like that. So you need to make sure that all your constitutional documents align with the plan that you actually want for your enterprise moving forward. Then we have to make sure that all of those are in place as well. Then company filings with relevant regulatory bodies, like have you been filing with URA? They will do a check with URA. Have you been filing your returns with URA? Have you been paying all the necessary taxes that you need to pay? If you have employees, have you been remitting their pay as you earn? Have you been paying NSSF for your employees? If you are VAT registered, have you been doing your VAT returns? Withholding tax, have you been compliant with that? All that will be checked. With URSP, have you been filing annual returns? Recently, URSP released, I think last year, was it last year? They released the list of companies that were going to be struck off. And I think there's a deadline for August, if I'm not mistaken, or July, 31st July, actually, where if the entities that were put on that list have not actually applied for reinstatement, they're going to be removed off the register and their names are going to be made available for other people to use. So have you been filing returns? And the list is so long. When they released the initial list of companies struck off for non-compliance, there are companies that registered and have never filed returns for years since they were registered. So have you been compliant with URSP? Are all your company documents tallying with what in the register? Like, do you have amended forms? Do you have the company form 20? Does it reflect the actual directors in the company? All that. So you have to be compliant with the regulatory bodies. With data protection office, have you been filing your returns with them? Are you registered with them as well? All that. That comes with the compliance with the relevant regulatory bodies. That is with, for example, as I say, the Data Protection Office, we mentioned this earlier, the FIA, URA, like, are you compliant with all these bodies? For example, if you're in the line of business, if you're regulated by UMRA, that is, if you're regulated by UMRA, do you have the necessary license, the money lending licenses for that? Things like that. Then, yeah, brings us back to licenses and permits. Do you have the necessary licenses and permits to do the work that you're doing, the business that you're doing, to offer the service that you're offering? Do you have all that in place? Your financial statements. For businesses that have been operating, they usually, investors usually ask for financial statements for the past 5 years. What are the financial statements for the past 5 years? Have you actually been having your accounting in place? Do you have records of everything? Then details of outstanding third-party indebtedness. For example, loan agreements, promissory notes, unpaid dates. Like, what certain enterprises do is that they keep getting loans from different people and also using the same security for these different loans. And another thing is that you have to also make sure that when you're looking at those loan agreements, you have to ensure some loan agreements, when you enter with a certain investor, in those loan agreements, especially for debt, since there's a security involved, they usually provide for the fact that you cannot be, as an enterprise, you cannot be allowed to actually get another funding from another investor until you've actually repaid back your loan. And these are things that most enterprises do not know, and they're usually part of the loan agreement. And then when you come and you get another investor, and then they do the due diligence, they see that your previous loan agreement clearly states that you cannot be able to be involved in another loan. Sometimes, usually, why investors do that is that they're trying to protect their interest in case the company goes under, or in case in cases where they need to recover, they need to secure themselves. They need to be able to know that I'm not competing with very many different other investors on getting getting investment back or getting my money back. So there are usually clauses like that in loan agreements. I mean, it's okay for enterprises to receive funding from various different entities. It happens, but you have to make sure that your loan agreement actually agrees and provides for that, because we're going to look at all that, the different third-party indebtedness, like is there another party involved, and how will that third party affect me as an investor? I want to also invest in this company, and yet there's also another party that has also invested in the company. So all that is that the investors will look at that. How much unpaid debts do you have? Is it really worth it for me? Okay, you took another loan from this investor, you took another loan from this bank. Like, is it really worth it for me with all the debts? Do I actually see myself getting my investment back? Things like that. The commitments you have with all these different other lenders. What commitment do you have, for example, with a bank or the microfinance? What commitment do you have with funder A? What commitment do you have with funder B? How does it affect me, funder C? All this. So the investors really have to do their groundwork, because remember, again, it's risk for them, especially when it comes to debt. When it comes to debt, it's high risk for them, especially for foreign lenders that are not even registered in the country. Then details of any encumbrances, third-party rights over businesses, assets, or sites. This, I discussed it before. For example, when you're using collateral, the land that you're putting forward as the collateral could actually have an encumbrance over it. It could have a caveat, or there could be third-party rights over that. And they have to check for that, because what security are you giving me? And am I sure that this is actually your security? The assets that you're pushing forward, are they really your assets? Are there any other rights over these assets that may hinder me from actually recovering when in cases of default? Then intellectual property rights, as I mentioned, if, for example, the products, especially the products that you're dealing with, like if you're having an innovative product that is actually going to create so much impact, register the trademark. A trademark is a unique mark, and it is first in time, first in, by the way, with trademarks, I think what I forgot to mention is that first in time, first to register is the one that gets the right of that trademark. So I could see your business prospering, and for example, let's say Shadiya Shea Butter Company is coming up, and it's slowly growing, and another person is just on the side looking at it. And they're like, you know what, I should also try and get into this shea butter business. They will go and steal your name and register that trademark, and you will have no right over them because they registered it first, even if you've been using it. So there's no defense of I've been using this mark. People know, unless it's very rare. It's those marks that have been used for years that have, like, people know that this mark is for this certain business, that they can align it with a certain business. That's when you could have a case. But especially as a startup, much as, let's say, people in your area, you will say your clients know you or what, but someone will go and register your mark and you'll have nothing. You'll have no defense, you'll have nothing, and all your hard work will have gone to waste. So registering intellectual property, especially the trademarks, that is key, because those are the ones that usually deal with copyrights. And I don't know if there are people here, maybe if there's someone that really deals with copyrights, then we can delve into that during the Q&A. Patents, as I said, very, very rare, very hard. For you to get a patent, whatever invention you have must be very, very noble. That is first of its kind and not seen anywhere, and it must be totally unique. So yeah, so intellectual property rights are key, because if I'm investing in your brand, in your business, in a certain idea, you need to have the control over it. We can't have another person stealing the name, registering the trademarks, and it happens. You will go, don't be surprised if you've been operating for a while and then you go and check the trademark registry and your name has been trademarked by another company or another individual. So you have to be sure, you have to protect your business from scratch in all ways. Then contracts and legal disputes, these are also reviewed. What contracts you have, the contracts that you have with the various, maybe partnership, the partnership contracts, the supplier contracts, your employment contracts, and what legal disputes are involved with those contracts. And then again, litigation history, as I said. We'll also look at the litigation history, like, are there any pending cases? Do you have any cases that are pending in the courts of law? Do you have any cases that are pending in in, for example, the labor court? Do you have any disputes pending with URA, the tax appeals tribunal, things like that? So the litigation history is also key. Again, the investors are trying to protect themselves because it is risky. Yeah, so that's really just a few tried. Well, I know I've been highlighting, but I know the questions will be quite many. I'm anticipating quite a number. But just really conclusion that your legal preparedness is really just the cornerstone of investor readiness for SMEs in Uganda. And you need to understand the landscape, you need to understand structuring the business appropriately, and you have to ensure compliance, and you have to manage your contracts effectively. So the key thing is really just structuring your business, understanding your landscape, and also ensuring that you're compliant with all the different regulatory bodies. I know it seems a lot, it seems quite much, but at the end of the day, you need this, and it's what is going to help you to receive the funding that you need, the funding that you deserve, and to really just scale your business and compete favorably with the global market. Thank you. I think I have talked a lot. Yeah, so.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Shadiya, for taking us to school about legal compliance. And I've been taking notes and thinking to myself, if we, I was asking myself if entrepreneurs realize the cost of compliance. There is a cost for compliance that sometimes we ignore.
Yeah.
So I imagine if entrepreneurs are supposed to focus on doing the business of the day, solving the needs in the community or in their market, they need to hire someone to make sure all these things are checked and set reminders, because it's an annual thing, you know.
Yeah.
To keep
Yes.
on updating your compliance annually, and there is a cost for that. So as we plan our businesses, as we try to improve our products, we must remember that we must be compliant. But then also, I realize that the search for funding is inevitable. At any point in the business, you will need money. And even if the money is from your father or your uncle, and I'm hoping that when you go to your uncle, he's going to ask for some kind of document, or they want to look at your books. Are you registered? How are your finances? You know, simple things that we need to put in place right at the start to make sure that if we are going to look for funding, or someone want to sell shares to somebody, our documents are in order and compliant. So very enlightening session. I've been taking quite a number of notes. I think at the first you hadn't mentioned NSSF. NSSF changed their regulations where before it was above 5 people, if you employ 5 people, but now the requirement is that anybody who is working requires social security.
Yes.
So the moment you sign,
even if it's one person, yeah.
Exactly. The moment you sign them up on a contract, as you sign them to pay their pay as you earn, they also must be registered for social security. We have learned a lot, Shadiya. We have 6 minutes to end this session. We will take some question here. There was a question. I think you talked about, someone was saying, who was it? David Mwesije said, you had mentioned only KCA in Kampala, but then there are companies that are setting up in other cities like Port Bottom, Bara, and Gulu. Share with us how this particular aspect of trading licenses or any of the things mentioned works up country. Do these office, okay, I know URA has an office, even NSSF has an office, but how do the other bodies do regulatory compliance for businesses out of Kampala? Shadiya?
Sorry, I thought you were talking to someone else. I was trying to type in, I was looking at the comments, and I think someone had asked for my email, so I was a bit distracted. So sorry, if you could just reiterate really quickly.
That is fine. My question to you is actually a question in the chat of, we know the regulatory authorities like KCCA and NSSF that do have offices across the country. So how do entrepreneurs out of Kampala deal with compliance for the other aspects?
Okay.
URSB could, but I don't know how do the people in Fort Portal handle, for example, the data protection elements
Okay.
and all those other aspects of compliance that you mentioned. How does one navigate it? We have a couple of friends in Barara, yes, and we also have some people towards the east of Uganda. So if they want to work on their compliance, how does it happen if they're not in Kampala?
All right. Okay, so the good thing, thank you, Belinda. And the good thing, as I said, I know most times as a country, we keep thinking we're not really developing, but the good thing with these entities, especially the regulatory bodies, they have now online platforms. The Personal Data Protection Office has an online platform. You can reach out to them online. They're very responsive via email. Any queries or anything, you can just visit the Personal Data Protection Office website, and then when you visit their website, they'll be able to, you can get the emails there, you can contact them, they're responsive via email. Their platforms are online, everything is submitted online, so that you can do online. FIA, you can also reach them online. They actually now have an online registration as well. I know URA has several offices in the different districts. They also have online platforms. URSB now, as I mentioned, has an online platform. You don't even have to go anywhere. You just can do it. You just have to, you create a company account, actually. Just create a company account with URSB. Once you do that, everything is done within the system. Even if there are any queries with any document, that you will receive a notification that there has been a query. The register will let you know what is wrong with the document. You can even respond to them just like a chat when they'll tell you that, this person needs to sign. Then you can tell them that, oh no, maybe this, I can't find this person. They'll respond to you, give you a solution. So I know it may not be as easy, but at least we have the online platforms that can be accessed for now. So yeah.
Okay, so I also want to ask you to guide us on how we can go about affording, because I know I do run a business. I don't think I have time to run around with URA, NSS, FIA, and we've discussed on this platform before. I think we were talking about accounting principles, that some businesses are not able to afford accountants at the start. So what they do is they share services. Okay, you could appoint an accountant to visit your business twice a month and be able to do your books, but you have to do the initial entry. Okay, you do the entry so that when the accountant comes, they're able to finalize the transactions. Now, when it comes to the legal compliance, I know that as businesses grow at the start, they might not be able to afford a lawyer who is able to do the quick checks. So how would you advise social enterprises? You said you're working with social enterprises, you're working with startups. Startups are very important. How would you advise the startup or social enterprise to navigate this journey of social compliance that has a cost? Yeah. What are some of the things that you could share with us?
Okay. Yes. All right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, of course, the biggest hindrance is the legal costs involved with when it comes to the costs involved when it comes to legal advisory and legal support. So that's a big thing. And I know that it's hard for enterprises to have this money. But so for example, we do have, as I said, from under our practice, we do offer very discounted fees. For example, we can have a retainer with these enterprises for just compliance. We do have discounted fees that we offer for this a retainer that helps us. For you run your business, but for us, we'll let you know that you need to register for this. This is the time to have this return filed, things like that. And these are discounted fees. And then I think another thing is really just to engage with enterprises and collaborators, like for example, Enterprise Uganda. I think we as a firm, because there are very few lawyers that provide this for social enterprises anyway. So I think just that collaboration between, so if we can collaborate with Enterprise Uganda or with any other different entities that are really supporting enterprises, where there's probably like a pool of funds where it can be used to discount and offer these services to the enterprises. That's also key. Then another thing is also just to encourage the businesses to also use now the online platforms, as I said. Now, it's now much easier. Before, you'd have to go to URSB, you need a lawyer, you need what, you need this. But now the online platforms are actually very user-friendly. Just you can, we are happy and open to receiving queries that you might have to guide you in that process, in all those processes. But when you use the online platforms and learn them, it's going to help you save so much costs. I mean, we also do want the money as lawyers and say, oh, you could bring the money to us and we do all these things for you. But we understand that there's so many enterprises that cannot afford that. And so there are online platforms. For example, now with URSP, you can do it on your own and still seek legal advisory from firms like ours and just say, okay, maybe I'm stuck here, I don't understand this, and I can guide you, we could guide you on those processes. But for now, I think for certain requirements that can save you money, you can do that without the legal costs. But of course, there are those that you will need a lawyer, certain like the loan agreements, all these different agreements that you need to be reviewed, or preparing for a due diligence, you will definitely need a lawyer. And I think we are happy to always offer discounted fees for social enterprises. That is our practice. We really discuss with the enterprise and see how best to support you within your budget and to ensure that you get the services that you need, as well as also saving you the money. And yeah.
Okay, great. I think as entrepreneurs, there's a lot we have to do as far as networks and social collaboration is concerned, because at one point in our business journey, there are things that we can't afford in solitude, but we can do them collectively. Okay, so thank you, Shadiya. Okay, people are asking what are the requirements. First of all, Shadiya has shared her number and her email address. It's in the chat. So let's take it down before the show comes on, and we'll be finishing in 3 minutes. There is her number. It's in the chat. Please go to the chat very quickly, save her email address and her number. She has said that they do offer discounted services for us entrepreneurs. So I hope we can take advantage of it. So much. Thank you so much for the appreciation for this discussion this morning. Stephen here is asking about the requirements for making returns with URSB. That is going to be like another whole, 10 minutes. But
no, maybe just to help Stephen,
as you do your parting shot,
because those are very easy. Because that is very easy. As a local company, honestly, returns, all you need is you'll just need the ID for the directors. That's it.
Okay, great. So there it is. And I was also going to ask you for your parting shot. We have 2 minutes to the end of this discussion. I know the consequences are really not getting the money in the case of funding. Yeah, if you're not compliant, then you won't get the funding. But on the like overall business, when you look at the overall success of the business in your parting shot, share with us why we need to be legally compliant. Even if we are not looking for funding, just share that as we close the discussion this morning.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Belinda. Really, honestly, I think as businesses, as enterprises, you get into a business, you set up your enterprise for a reason and for a purpose. Even if it's not for you to receive funding or anything, there's a reason. You're creating actual impact into this country, and you're doing that. You're helping people. You're also supporting yourself. You're supporting your families. So let's stop looking at these things of like, I'm just trying things here and there. Let's start looking at things like the bigger picture of actually, when you start up a business, have purpose for it. Don't just do things haphazardly. So why would you start something if you're not going to put in your all? You get? So even if it's not for funding, make sure that you have a company that you know that is actually compliant, because it may not be for funding, but it could be for scaling. Just having the proper legal compliance would help your company scale in ways that you wouldn't know. And just really having just you as a person knowing that, you know what, I'm actually doing something for a purpose and I'm actually being compliant. So I think there's a bigger goal behind why everybody started up the enterprises that they have and the businesses that they have. And you have to always dig deep and remember that reason. And so do everything for a purpose. And that means also doing everything fully, not haphazardly or not 50, just and relieving the other 50. And the other 50 means being compliant in all ways and actually having an airtight business. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Brilliant celebrations for you in the chat for such a great presentation this Thursday morning. Thank you so much, Shadiya. We have your email address and your number. Please do allow us to reach you for further consultation. And I would really be interested in if your organization could do for us a list for compliance for every sector, for the health sector, for manufacturing, and then possibly do a package that we can share. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
For in health, in manufacturing, in agriculture, so that it can be easy to communicate to people to understand, and then we can give people a way start them up onto the journey to compliance. Oh, great. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this morning. Time flies by so much when we are learning. I hope you have picked something that you're going to do for your business. If it is overwhelming, I want to assure you that you can start from somewhere, and we have a contact that we can get in touch with. So I would like to bring the discussion to a stop, and I promise that we'll be here again next Thursday to discuss another topic that is important for our businesses. And until then, I wish you the best for the rest of the week, and I wish you happy compliance. What do they call it? What is the best way to wish someone compliance? How do they say it?
I don't know.